The first so-called midseason trade of the year, the Seattle Seahawks are acquiring defensive lineman Robertson-Harris from the Jacksonville Jaguars in exchange for a 2026 sixth-round pick. Now, let's look at what this means, why they did it, and give you some information that we know about Robertson-Harris. Now, one thing that I know is I love to go through comments when a trade happens on Twitter, on Ian Rappaport's Twitter, on Mike Garofalo's Twitter, and see what people were saying about him. And a lot of people, Seahawks fans, were asking, what do you think of this guy? I feel like the biggest comment was, he's good, he's a solid player, but there's a lot of games where he just doesn't exist. He doesn't show up. And that happens. There's a lot of players like that. I feel that way sometimes about a lot of players on the Seahawks defense. Not all of them. Not trying to be a hater. But there's a lot of times as an interior defensive lineman, as a defensive tackle, where you maybe are making some impact, but it's hard to notice on the screen and it doesn't show up in the stats, which is fine. He is a solid player. He spent his first 4 years with the Bears, and he had a pretty great season in 2019 and 2020. And the Jaguars ended up signing him to a 3-year, $24.4 million deal. And he's been a full-time starter since. And he had 3 sacks his first 2 years in Jacksonville. He also had multi-digit QB hits in 2022 and 2023. And it landed him, surprisingly, an extension this offseason in February. 3 years, $21.6 million extension that keeps him under contract through 2026. So he's obviously a piece that the Jaguars felt would be a good piece to keep on this year and keep on for the next few years. But starting off 1-5 has obviously put the Jaguars more in the seller market than the buyers. And I think the Seahawks are looking at their situation saying, we're 3-3, but we're tied essentially without the tiebreaker. We're tied at the same record as the 49ers in the division, and we have a chance to keep this season going and be somewhat of a contender or be somebody that's in the buyer's market. And so they made the first mid-season, quote-unquote, trade of the year, a Week 6 trade, and going after a player who could be an impact player. So let's look at some of the numbers, I guess, and some of the PFF grades is something I'm interested in. Before I get to that, I want to mention the contract. We're going to be paying $1.4 million this year for him, essentially as a rental, because his salaries goes up each year, but there's $0 guaranteed on his 2025 or 2026 contract. So the Seahawks are essentially using him as a rental, and his cap hit, if we bring him on, will be 8.9 next year and then 9.1 the following year, unless there's adjustments to his contract. But they only have 1.7 or 1.6 of the base salary left this year, and it was essentially a low-cost acquisition, 6-rounder, $1.7 million, and somebody that may be able to help and add depth. Like I said, he had 3 sacks each of the last 2 years. He had double-digit QB hits in 2022 and 2023. He had a sack on Caleb Williams on Sunday in London that you can look up on Twitter or whatever. He's an impact player of some sort. So why'd they do this? Well, a guy with a pair of sacks, 2 sacks, 4 QB hits on the year. He's not necessarily a crazy impact player, but he's an impact player, a veteran at a key spot, and we're trying to load up a little bit. But this suggests to me that they're not very happy with the depth. I think, Jaron Reed's having a good season, and so is Leonard Williams. If we don't worry about sack numbers or anything, but even like Leonard Williams has actually been a really solid player despite maybe not seeing any huge plays or anything popping off the screen. He's having a good season. But you have guys like Draymond Jones on the line. I know he's kind of hybrided into other spots too, but he hasn't been very good for a guy that we're paying, I think, our 5th or 6th biggest salary of the season. Byron Murphy has been out for 2 weeks. Maybe there's other injuries we're not aware of. Obviously, Uchenna Nwasu is kind of listed as a linebacker, but he's really an edge defensive lineman type of guy, him and Boye Mafe, but Uchenna Nwasu is back on the IR. So they needed depth on the defensive line. And I think this is a key indication that behind guys like Jaron Reed and Leonard Williams, he's a guy that may be able to come in and make some impact when needed. So we did the trade. And I think initially it's a decent trade. We're talking about a Seahawks team that is 10th in passing yards on defense allowed per game, but 27th on the ground. We need to defend the run better. I mean, at the end of the day, we saw the Lions be able to run all over us and pass all over us with the 18 for 18 from Jared Goff. But being 27th on the ground and yards allowed is not good, especially we're going to Atlanta this week with Tyler Algier. I can never say it right. I'm sorry. I always butcher names. And Bijan Robinson. We have another two-headed monster coming our way on Sunday. The Seahawks are looking at this saying, man, we're going to be at the bottom 2-3 teams in yards allowed per game and rushing yards. We need to do something to upgrade this defensive line, and this is the move that they're looking at. Now, at this point in the season, you have to remember, good teams with really good players are not going to be traded going into week 7. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to get some superstar. Not going to go trade for a TJ Watt or Max Crosby right now. Maybe Max Crosby pushed his coach this week, but we're not getting him anyways, money-wise, and whatever other reasons you could possibly put out there. This is the time of the year where it's, end of week 6. They're like, hey, let's find a guy that could make some kind of impact for only $1.7 million. A guy that we don't have to give up anything for. A 6th-round pick in 2026 is not a big deal to give up right now. Rarely do 6th-round picks even make impacts long-term in the NFL. So it works. Why not get a little bit better for a team that has a chance to still compete in this league? Now, Ian Rappaport's tweet said, Seahawks get standout defensive tackle Robertson-Harris. And standout was maybe a little bit of a stretch. I don't know if he's been that good, but he's been a solid player throughout his career. Now, this year, the numbers have not been very good when we look at PFF grades. I'll try to put them up on the screen here. He's been, in the 50s and 60 ranges in grading and been okay, right? But as a whole, the defense for the Jaguars hasn't been great either. The Jaguars have been bad. They're a 1-5 team. We can look at his PFF grades here for each season. He obviously shined the most in his, 2018, 19, and 20 with the Bears. But he's been a starter for Jacksonville since. He got an extension. The biggest flaw you can see is tackling grades. Not a great tackler, but, when it comes to putting pressure on a quarterback, sometimes tackling's you obviously want to wrap up, but a guy that can attack the quarterback and get QB hits is what's more important than if, is he causing havoc, I guess. We're not talking open field tackling. We're not talking about a linebacker here. We're not talking about a corner that's just butchering tackles. We're talking about an interior defensive lineman. So, good trade. I think he is, as you can see by grades, a solid player. Not insanely good, but a solid player. And somebody that might be able to help the Seahawks here moving forward in the near future. And we know that it's going to be interesting to see where this defense comes from, right? And at the end of the day, Harris Robertson played 210 snaps this year for Jacksonville so far, the most of any defensive tackle on the roster. Despite them not being good, they've been top 10 in rushing success rate so far as a defense. So the Seahawks are probably looking at what low-hanging fruit can we get that's been successful on a team that's successful at the specific thing that we need. They're not looking at, the Jags defense in total or the Jags record or his statistics maybe specifically that in depth. They're probably looking at the fact that, hey, top 10 rushing success rate team in Jacksonville, the guy that's played the most snaps for them this year in the interior defense, and we need some depth at defensive tackle, and we need to get better at the rush game. So let's just do it. And I think that's a fair way to look at it. He'll be a solid addition. He'll make some impact plays, and he will be much better than our current situation, most likely. That's the important thing here is we need our current situation to be better, and this hopefully is what triggers that to be better. He has a long flight from London, 10 hours. Remember, the Jags played back-to-back games in London this year. They played the Bears this week, and then they're playing somebody else this coming week. He'll land in Seattle, they're saying, for his new team, and then probably head straight to Atlanta after. But 10-hour flight, it's going to be a long one. midweek while you're in London, that's tough. But I think this is going to be an okay move for us. So that's all I got on him pretty much. Just a strong, athletic defensive lineman. He doesn't get pushed back much. He finishes plays. And what else can I say, right? Like, we have to wait and see what actually happens. But I'm going to take this at being really displeased with Draymond Jones. And, anyone else behind Murphy, Reed, and Leonard Williams, because otherwise they wouldn't make this move. And they know that Uchenna Nwasu is hurt. So they're going to need some Draymond Jones more on the edge, like they've been planning to do. And let's see what happens. I mean, it's going to be hard to evaluate anything more than that at this point, but keep making plays. Hopefully it works out. And he signed a 3-year, $24 million extension this offseason with $14 million guaranteed. All that tells you is the Jags really liked him. He played the most snaps, like we said, out of anybody on the defensive tackle position for the Jaguars, a team that's been good at stopping the run, better than most teams. And now he's added to the Seahawks defense, who really needs to stop it. So let's just hope for the best. We needed something to be done because this defense has not been cutting it. And let's just use this as another hopeful that we can just trust in Mike McDonald, this culture, what we can do with defensive players like he did in Baltimore. And when we're healthy, maybe we'll start to figure it out the right way. So welcome to the Seahawks, Roy Robertson, Harris, and let's go win some football games. We'll be back soon. I love y'all. See you next time.